get seated. Thank you, choir. Thank you very much, colleagues. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, colleagues. To our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Songca, our Deputy Vice-Chancellors, DVC Research and Internalization Professor, DVC Teaching and Learning, Prof. Enongene, our executive deans from all faculties, executive management, directors, senior directors, HODs, faculties, and the most important guests, our students, and all sections of the university, including ICT, MCD, student affairs, all support services, libraries, and all of them that are here in the house. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm sure students are happy today. I'm calling them colleagues. Today, we are celebrating the academic journey of Professor Sone. You know, colleagues, to be a full professor is not child's play. Firstly, let me say congratulations, Prof. You have done it. You are here now. Let us clap hands for the congratulations for Professor Sone. I'm so happy to be the program director today in your inaugural lecture. This is history in the university. Wow. Colleagues, I'm not going to waste time. I'm going to ask my Vice-Chancellor and Principal, Professor Songca, to come and welcome us. Over to you, Prof. Do you have a song to make the VC stand up? Just a song. You are here, Prof. I was starting to dance.
In the Bonager. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. Let me begin by extending my warmest welcome to Professor Sone's family. Your presence here makes this celebration complete, because behind every great scholar stands a family that understands the late nights, the endless revisions, the conference travels, and most importantly, shares in the joy of moments like this one. Thank you for sharing him with us and for being such an integral part of his journey. To our distinguished guests, fellow academics, colleagues from across the university and other universities, our students, and everyone who has made the effort to be here this afternoon, thank you. Your presence transforms what could have been a simple academic exercise into a joyous celebration it deserves to be. Professor Sone, having read your curriculum vitae and having worked with you on numerous projects, I realized a few things. When you joined WSU in 2014 as a senior lecturer, in 2 years, you had already earned your C3 NRF rating, and soon after became an associate professor, which tells me that when you joined the university, you had a vision. Your vision was to ensure that your research does not remain locked in ivory towers, particularly because your research speaks directly to our continent's deepest questions about identity, knowledge, and cultural continuity. Today, your inaugural lecture themed Orality and Intellectualism, the role of oral literature in shaping Africa's knowledge systems, could not be more timely or necessary. This is because we're in an era where African voices are finally claiming their rightful space in global conversations. And I know that today, Professor Sone will remind us that our intellectual traditions were never silent, but were simply speaking in languages the world had forgotten how to hear. What strikes me most about your scholarship is how it embodies Ubuntu, that fundamental understanding that knowledge belongs not to individuals but to communities, that wisdom flows not just from books but from the voices of our elders. The intellectualism is not about exclusion but about connection. Your research demonstrates that excellence is not about abandoning our roots but about understanding them so deeply that we can share their richness with the world. In fact, your research in African literature and cultural studies does more than document our past, it creates bridges to our future. When you explore how oral traditions shape knowledge systems, you're not just preserving culture, you're demonstrating that African ways of knowing offer solutions to contemporary challenges. You're showing young researchers, whom I hope I see are also here today, that their heritage is not a burden to overcome, but a foundation to build upon. To our emerging researchers in the audience today, look carefully at this moment. Professor Sone's journey from 2014 to this podium was not traveled alone. It was supported by mentors, sustained by community, and driven by the kind of intellectual curiosity that our university celebrates. His success serves as a foundation upon which you can build even greater achievements. Congratulations, Professor Sone, on a well-deserved recognition. Your inaugural lecture today will undoubtedly challenge us, inspire us, and remind us why Walter Sisulu remains committed to producing not just graduates, but versatile individuals who understand their place in the great conversation of human knowledge. Thank you for all your contributions, and may today's celebration mark the beginning of even greater contributions to African scholarship and the mentorship of countless researchers who will one day stand where you stand tonight.
Thank you very much, Prof. Songca, for that warm welcome. Now I'm going to call Professor Feza, DVC Research and Internalization, to come and introduce our inaugural professor. Over to you, Prof.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Enongene Sone, a distinguished scholar of African literature, folklore, and cultural studies, is a towering intellectual whose life's journey mirrors the transformative power of education and resilience. Born in Kinko village, nestled in the Bangam subdivision of the southwest region of Cameroon, he is the son of the late Mr. Enongene Martin Sone and Mrs. Ekume Adeline. From the modest beginnings of his primary schooling at the government primary school, Kinko, where he earned his first school leaving certificate, Professor Sone charted a course marked by tenacity, excellence, and an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. At the government bilingual high school Bangam, he distinguished himself, earning the General Certificate of Education ordinary level in 1992 and advanced level in 1995. His academic pursuits took him to the University of Chang, where under the mentorship of his revered supervisors, Professors Kwich Fonko Gabriel and Kashim Ibrahim Tala, he completed a Bachelor of Arts in African Literature in 1998, a Master of Arts in 2000, and a Master of Philosophy in 2003. This solid academic foundation paved the way for his appointment as an assistant lecturer in 2000 and later as a lecturer at the University of Burundi, where he spent 4 important years before moving to the University of Swaziland in 2007. While in Swaziland, his intellectual curiosity and commitment to scholarship led him to pursue a PhD in African literature at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, which he completed in 2012. His postdoctoral fellowship at the same institution further deepened his research into oral literature and environmental education. In 2014, Professor Sone joined Walter Sisulu University as a senior lecturer, where his academic career blossomed spectacularly. By 2016, he had earned his first NRF rating, which was C3, and quickly ascended to associate professor in 2017 and full professor in 2022. Today, he serves as the chair of the Department of Arts in the Faculty of Law, Humanities and Social Sciences, a role he assumed in 2024. Professor Sone is recognized as a C2 rated researcher by the South African National Research Foundation, acknowledging his established research productivity and the quality and impact of his work on African literature, orality, and cultural studies. He has published more than 50 scientific papers, journal articles, and book chapters alongside landmarked monographs such as A South African Folktales 2023 and Central African Folktales 2024. His collaborative works, The Challenge of Folklore to the Humanities and the Palgrave Handbook of African Oral Traditions and Folklore in 2021 remain foundational texts in the African literacy studies. His scholarly impact extends across continents. He has held prestigious fellowships and visiting professorships, including at the Center of Communication, Culture and Society, Xi'an, Liverpool University, China, the University of Edinburgh in the United Kingdom, Wayne State University in Detroit, USA, and the University of Pennsylvania, USA, under the mentorship of the late Professor Dan Ben Amos, a leading world scholar in folklore studies. As a prolific researcher, Prof. Sone integrates decolonial thought, medical humanities, environmental humanities, and post-colonial theory into African literary discourse, opening new pathways for engaging African knowledge systems and cultural heritage. Professor Sone's academic journey is adorned with numerous awards and honors, including the highly productive Researcher Award at Walter Sisulu University, multiple NRF knowledge interchange and collaboration grants, and recognition among the top 5 researchers at Walter Sisulu University from 2013 to 2015. Beyond his academic work, Professor Sone is a devoted husband to Evelyn Sone, Etone, and a proud father to 2 wonderful children, Precious Kelantube Enongene and Enongene Sone Jr. Today, as he stands at the pinnacle of an illustrious career, delivering his inaugural lecture titled Orality and Intellectualism, the role of oral literature in shaping Africa's knowledge systems, Professor Sone embodies the African proverb, the child of a snake is also a snake. For like the elders and griots he writes about, he carries forward the legacy of wisdom, courage, and transformative leadership. His life and scholarship continue to inspire generations of students, colleagues, and communities across Africa and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Professor Enongene Sone.
Vice-Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellors, the Registrar, Data Campus Director, Senior Librarian, Senior Directors, Executive Deans and Deputy Executive Deans, Principal Officers of our noble university, Directors, Members of the Council, Members of the Senate, heads of departments, professors of our great university, teaching and non-teaching staff, members of my family, distinguished guests of our university, great students of WSU, lovers of African literature and cultural studies, Morwen. Ladies and gentlemen, it is said in Africa that a river that forgets its source will soon run dry. Today, as I stand before this distinguished gathering, I am reminded of the many rivers that have flowed into my life, carrying with them wisdom, mentorship, and support, enabling me to stand tall like the Iroko tree. Thus the proverb, if you see a man standing taller than the baobab, know that he is standing on the shoulders of many. I am profoundly honored to have been granted this unique opportunity to deliver my inaugural lecture, an academic rite of passage that invites a scholar to share not only the fruits of his or her research, but the roots from which the intellectual journey draws strength. It is a moment to reflect on the questions I have pursued, the intellectual terrain I have traversed, and the contributions I hope to make as a custodian of knowledge in this great institution. The storyteller does not own the stories. They belong to the people, and the people lend them to the storyteller for their slave keeping. This inaugural lecture comes 3 years after my appointment as full professor of African Literature and Cultural Studies, and marks the 3rd such lecture from the Faculty of Law, Humanities, and Social Sciences, after that of my elders, Professor Obioha and Professor Kangete. I greet you. As the proverb wisely reminds us, when the roots are deep, there is no need to fear the wind. This occasion calls on us to reflect deeply on the intellectual heritage of Africa and the relevance in shaping our present and future. Today, I stand before you to speak about a matter of profound urgency and timeless relevance. My topic, orality and intellectualism, the role of oral literature in shaping Africa's knowledge systems, speaks directly to the heart of the epistemological traditions of Africa. It invites us as an academic community to rethink about or to rethink what it means to profess knowledge in a world where oral traditions have too often been dismissed as ephemeral or unsystematic. Yet, as the Akan proverb, or as the Akan people wisely say, wisdom is not in the head of one person. Oral literature, with its encoded scientific, ethical, historical, and ecological wisdom, has sustained African societies for centuries. It beckons us to recognize that the foundations of intellectualism in Africa are deeply rooted in orature. It is a dynamic, adaptive, and profoundly sophisticated. This is not just a lecture, Madam Vice-Chancellor. It is a call. It is a call to return to our intellectual wells, to drink deeply from the wisdom of our ancestors, and to forge pathways where oral and written traditions enrich one another in building a truly African knowledge system. When the roots of a tree begin to decay, it spreads death to its branches. If we are to preserve the vitality of the intellectual heritage of Africa, we must honor and revitalize our oral traditions as living archives of knowledge. Framing the lecture. When an elder dies, according to Professor Amadou Hampateba, a library burns to the ground, so says Amadou Hampateba from Mali. I begin with this timeless wisdom because it captures the essence of what we are gathered here to reflect upon today. The intellectual wealth, the vast repositories of knowledge, and the philosophical depth encoded in the oral traditions of Africa. These are not mere words. They are libraries of thought, lived wisdoms, and cultural memory carried in the hearts and voices of our people. Today, I stand before you, Madam Vice-Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, not merely as an academic delivering an inaugural lecture, but as a custodian of stories, voices, and memories, living echoes of a continent whose intellectual heritage was once transmitted not by ink or paper, but by voices around fires, under trees, and in palaces. Africa has always been thinking. Africa has always been teaching. Long before the printed word, there were words performed, sung, chanted, debated, and woven into the very fabric of our communal life. Our philosophers spoke in Proverbs. Our historians recited genealogies. Our scientists encoded medicinal knowledge in myths and rituals. Yet colonialism told us to forget. It told us to see our orality as primitive, our stories as mere entertainment, and our elders as irrelevant to modern knowledge. Today, I reject this erasure. This lecture is a response, a recovery, a reaffirmation of the intellectual wealth encoded in the oral traditions of Africa. Today, this lecture is my act of revisal and recovery. It is a response to the centuries of erasure. It is a deliberation that African oral literature is not a quaint tradition to be romanticized. It is a robust, sophisticated intellectual system that has shaped our ethics, our governance, our education, and our cultural resilience. It is as valid and rigorous as any written philosophy, and perhaps even more adaptive because it is alive. With this journey, we will explore how orality shapes thought, memory, and knowledge systems, how it resists epistemic violence, and how it offers us pathways to decolonize African scholarship and reclaim our place in global intellectual history. Introduction. In many African societies, the word is power. Spoken words embedded in proverbs, folktales, praise poetry, epics, and ritual performances have long functioned as the principal vehicles for preserving history, transmitting values, and negotiating communal identity. Far from being a mere precursor to literacy, orality is a fully developed intellectual tradition central to the cultural epistemologies and systems of knowledge production in Africa, according to Finnegan, Sone, and Ong. It is this voice, the voice of the griot, the storyteller, the radence of the praise poet, and the wisdom of the elder that African philosophical, legal, historical, and aesthetic frameworks have been articulated, challenged, and reaffirmed across generations. Yet, despite its rich intellectual heritage, African oral literature has been historically marginalized by Eurocentric epistemologies that privilege the written word. Colonial education systems and Western scholarship systematically rendered oral traditions inferior, relegating them to the periphery of folklore while championing textuality as the only legitimate mode of intellectual discourse. The epistemic violence, termed epistemicide by Hall and Tandon, disrupted the continuity of African indigenous knowledge systems as alienated generations from their oral intellectual heritage. Therefore, colleagues, this lecture is both a celebration and a reclamation. It demonstrates that oral literature is not a relic of a pre-literate past, but a vibrant, adaptive, and sophisticated mode of intellectualism. It posits that orality continues to inform African philosophical reflections, social governance, pedagogy, aesthetic, and even digital engagement in profound ways. Drawing on interdisciplinarity perspective, this lecture addresses 6 critical dimensions. 1, the philosophical and theoretical underpinnings of orality as a knowledge system. 2, the role of oral literature in shaping Africa's knowledge traditions. 3, the colonial marginalization of orality and the need for epistemological justice. 4, the digital revitalization of orality in the 21st century. And 6, the role of university lecturers, me and you, as elders and intellectuals. In so doing, I believe that this lecture calls for paradigmatic shift, a decolonized understanding of intellectualism that affirms oral literature as a foundational pillar of the scholarly and cultural landscape of Africa. 3, theoretical foundations of orality and intellectualism. Orality and intellectualism are interconnected concepts that explore how oral traditions influence intellectual thought in cultural practices. This relationship has been extensively studied, particularly in the context of how society transition from oral to literate forms of communication. The study of orality and intellectualism in the African context challenges dominant epistemological frameworks by affirming that the spoken word, embodied, performed, transmitted, and socially embedded, is not only a vehicle of communication, but also a site of serious intellectual inquiry. Unlike Western fixation on literacy as the sine qua non of knowledge production, African societies have cultivated rich intellectual traditions through oral literature. Ladies and gentlemen, you people should know that there are 3 broad categories of literature in Africa. You have oral literature in African languages. You have written literature in African languages, like what we have course books on written literature. We also have written literature in European languages. Now, of these 3 types of literature, the most predominant is oral literature in African languages because most of its users, according to the Western sense of literacy, are illiterate, and most of them live in rural areas. Now, before I talk of oral literature, of what is oral literature, I need to discuss briefly about what is literature. And of course, it is a blanket term and generally presents a difficulty of definition. We all know the popular saying that I want to this literature review, literature on that, literature on this, literature on that. That's why you have books on history, sociology, and so on and so forth, which does not. Yet, these same people, when you present this book, these books are not literature. Why? The Nigerian scholar Odiodio says because these books do not take as their major delineation the human experience in sustained aesthetics. So, literature has to do with the norms, the values, the ideas of a people expressed in carefully selected language. It has to do with the creative expression of the human mind, what Bernard Nsokeka Fallon calls eschatology. And Tala Kashim goes forward to say that when an individual expresses his feelings in joy or sorrows, literature is said to be on the making. Language is the raw material of literature. That's the most important thing. And a good literature is one in which language has been effectively used. Now, when a literary text has been performed orally, transmitted orally, and composed orally, that text is called oral literature. It means there are three things that govern the definition of oral literature: oral composition, oral transmission, and oral performance. But this definition, we must have a performer, a storyteller, a singer, must be performed before an audience like you on a specific occasion. So today, oral literature is mostly seen as embodying proverbs, rituals, songs, even modern songs, riddles, myths, legends, etc., etc. Intellectualism from an African perspective. The concept of the intellectual has been defined in diverse ways across cultures and epochs. Edward Said, the Palestinian scholar, describes the intellectual as an individual endowed with the faculty of representing, embodying, articulating a message, a view, an attitude, philosophy, or opinion to as well as for a public. Antonio Gramsci sees intellectuals as people who perform an organizing function in a society by shaping ideas, values, and cultures. And the famous linguist, Noam Chomsky, sees the intellectual is a moral agent, one who speaks the truth and exposes lies, often standing in opposition to power. Most intellectuals are not loved because they do what? They speak the truth. Synthesizing these perspectives, an intellectual may broadly be understood as a thinker, as a social actor who critically engages knowledge systems, articulates ideas, and challenges or advance society, and assumes responsibility for shaping cultural, political, and ethical discourses. From an African standpoint, ladies and gentlemen, however, the definition must extend beyond Western notions of solitary thinker as a detached critic. Drawing from the oral traditions and communal epistemologies of Africa, an intellectual is a custodian of wisdom, a moral guide, and a facilitator of social harmony. The African intellectual is one who embodies the griot's role, not only preserving and interpreting knowledge, but performing it within the community to inspire action and transformation. This perspective reflects the proverb, wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one individual can embrace it. Or, as Achebe puts it, knowledge is like a goatskin bag. Everyone carries his own. Thus, in the context of this inaugural lecture, we offer the following working definition to me and many other African scholars. An intellectual, from an African perspective, is a socially embedded thinker and custodian of ancestral and contemporary knowledge, who through orality and action mediates between the wisdom of the past and the needs of the present to shape ethical and sustainable futures. In other words, an intellectual is not only someone who possesses formal education or academic credentials, like having a PhD, master's, or BA, no. But also one who has deep knowledge, wisdom, and ability to use that knowledge for the benefit of his or her community. African intellectualism values both oral and written traditions, encompassing practical wisdom, cultural preservation, and societal transformation. This definition situates the African intellectual not merely as a thinker, but as a living conduit of ancestral wisdom and a moral agent, whose words and actions shape knowledge, wisdom for the collective good. Rooted in orality, this definition highlights the intellectual's responsibility not only to preserve knowledge, but to perform it in ways that inspire transformation. Much like the griots and the sages of African oral traditions, it also underscores the intellectual's role as a bridge between ancestral wisdom and contemporary challenges, aligning perfectly with the thematic concerns of this inaugural lecture. This makes it both textually grounded and forward-looking, reinforcing the idea that intellectualism in Africa is as much about ethical leadership and community engagement as it is about critical thought. An African intellectual can be a sage or a griot. Elders who possess the deep indigenous knowledge and wisdom passed down through generations. these elders, as we know, are very important. A traditional healer, experts in medicine, spirituality, and holistic health care, a community leader or philosopher, those who guide social, political, and moral issues, or a modern scholar, academics, who critically engage with African history, knowledge systems, and contemporary challenges. Unlike Western view, which often associates intellectualism with written words and academic qualifications, African intellectual traditions recognize both literacy and oral experts as valid and valuable forms of knowledge. Early conceptions of African folklore. The story of oral literature by foreign scholars started more than a century ago. Sociologists, ethnologists, and anthropologists collected a vast body of oral literature, studied the corpus from the perspective of their various disciplines. As a result, many of their earlier approaches to the study of oral literature in Africa have been inadequate in the sense that they have obscured certain points of interest and have also given birth to several unexamined assumptions about the nature of oral literature. For example, Alan Merriam and James Vaughan, both professors of anthropology. I know Professor Leslie Bank as an anthropologist. So, these two scholars, both professors and anthropologists, declare that although Africans have something which is similar in certain aspects to what is known to the West as literature, they do not appear to have their own qualitative criteria for evaluating it. So, therefore, we don't have our own critical theory. These two scholars might have turned a blind eye to the fundamental principles of literary appreciation that affirm that literary judgment should rely on knowledge and acceptance of the cultural reference system from which the literature emanates. If you are asked, for example, to talk about this university, WUSU, this great institution, if you've not come from here, if you have not been in this campus, and you sit somewhere around, maybe at the roadside, and write an essay, it wouldn't be correct. So you must be an inside and talk about the inside. You can't be an outside and talk about the inside. So, the observation by two American scholars referred to above reinforced the idea that Africa was a continent lacking in literary sensibilities. The following quote from Professor Isidore Opeho, is very, very instructive. He says, there used to be a widely held view, especially among European intellectuals, who observed African societies in the 19th century, that there was nothing of true poetic merit in African oral literature. Poetry, these scholars argued, is a mark of an advanced culture or civilization. Traditional African scholars were, on the contrary, still groping with the dark and not yet attained the level of perception that men could engage in the pursuit of poetic excellence. Now, you see that such prejudice against the black man and the culture made for juicy readings in European, as Europeans consistently engaged in a repulsive and repugnant stereotyping of the continent. The overall intention was to portray that Africans as a people with no contribution or had no contribution to human civilization or the development of a world culture. However, much has been done by Africans in bringing home this point. And I quote Professor Oko, Nigerian scholar as well, who told us, and I quote him, educate the nascent African to be a man. Tell him that he had made definite contributions to history. Educate him to appreciate the fact that iron was discovered by Africans. that the concept of God was initiated by Africans, that Africa ruled the world from 1765 to 1713 BC, that while Europe slumbered during the Dark Ages, a great civilization flourished in the banks of the Niger, extending from the salt mines of Tegaza in Morocco to Lake Chad. Narrate to him the law of Ethiopia, of Ghana, of Sangay. Let them relish with the world that while the University of Oxford and Cambridge were still in their inchoate primitive stage or stages, the University of Sankore in Timbuktu welcomed scholars and learned men from all over the Muslim world, as Percy puts it. This passage provided above emphasis that African oral literature can offer the younger generation the opportunity to learn much about the contribution of Africans to the world civilization. Such knowledge gives meaning to Africanness or blackness. Ladies and gentlemen, decolonizing systems, knowledge systems. The dominance of Western epistemologies has often marginalized African indigenous knowledge systems, relegating them to the periphery of academic discourse. This marginalization has profound implications for educational practices across the continent. This lecture emphasizes the need for a decolonial approach that reclaims oral traditions as legitimate forms of knowledge, capable of addressing contemporary challenges faced by many African societies. By integrating African indigenous knowledge systems to higher education curricula, we can foster an environment where diverse ways of knowing are acknowledged and valued. Decolonization involves critically examining the structures that uphold European narratives, while recognizing the richness of indigenous perspective. And I want to acknowledge my colleague, who is, of course, the dean of our faculty, Professor Tabisani Lovu, is very, very, very active and active in the field of decolonization. And that is a method that in most cases he adopts. And anything that we discuss as Africans must be based on that epistemology. In science, African oral traditions offer a wealth of indigenous knowledge that is overlooked in mainstream scientific discourses. Environmental wisdom, agricultural practices, and health knowledge have been preserved and transmitted through oral literature for generations. For example, the Basotho people of Southern Africa use praise poetry to honor the mountains, emphasizing their ecological importance and advocating for their protection. Similarly, oral narratives about traditional healers provide a framework of understanding and preserving medicinal plant knowledge, a resource that modern pharmacology has only begun to explore. As Amadou Hampateba says eloquently, in Africa, when an old man dies, it is a library that is burning. Dear colleagues, Madam Vice-Chancellor, you will bear with me that you have instances where somebody is very, very sick. That person is taken to the hospital. They conduct all types of orthodox texts, Western texts, in the laboratory. And that person, they say, they don't know what is wrong with him. They don't find anything positive, anything. That person is dying. That is the limitation. But that same person, when he's taken to a traditional healer, maybe he didn't do one of the ceremonies of the late father, they just take a small leaf, herb, and put on him, and he's healed. So you see the scientificity of African knowledge systems. Orality as legitimate intellectual tradition. For too long, orality has been dismissed as a prelated stage in the evolution of knowledge systems, a linear model inherited from colonial anthropology and Eurocentric historiography. However, scholars such as Walter Ong and Madibuchi Ozoma. I don't mean Dr. Ozoma here. Have forcefully challenged this notion. Ong's work on orality and literacy, the technologizing of the word, highlights the cognitive sophistication of oral cultures. He argues that oral societies rely on different yet equally valid modes of knowing, mnemonic devices, rhythmic structures, formulaic patterns, and participatory engagement. These methods are not primitive. The role of oral literature in shaping African knowledge systems. Oral literature has been always functioned as a foundational medium through which African societies construct, transmit, and negotiate knowledge. Far from being a mere performative tradition, oral literature has shaped philosophical inquiry, moral reasoning, historical memory, and political governance. It is both an archive and an instrument used to encode communal wisdom, regulate ethical behavior, and preserve historical consciousness. Now, we are working on oral tradition and philosophy. Now, let me start with Proverbs and folktales as pedagogical and moral tools. Proverbs and folktales are perhaps the most succinct expression of African oral philosophy and pedagogy. According to Asimang Buan, these forms are didactic tools used to teach values, stimulate reflection, and sharpen ethical reasoning in both formal and informal stages. Let me start with Proverbs. Proverbs are simply defined as popular sayings in relatively fixed forms that are in oral circulation and marked by their brevity. They are fundamental ingredients in the lives. They are fundamental ingredients in the intellectual traditions of Africa. They stem from everyday activities and embrace the philosophical and sociocultural value systems of the people. African social organizations are based on the assumption that age and experience that comes with it are indispensable to the well-being of the society or of the community. Age is respected in Africa because of the sagacity and perspicacity that comes with it. Among the Yoruba of Nigeria, for example, we find these proverbs: a lack of elders destroys the city. Or, the youth might have as many clothes as the elder, but he would not have as many rags. The implication of these two proverbs is that social responsibility devolves on the elders by virtue of their longer experience of life. The conviction here is that the longer a man lives, the more experience he will acquire. His wealth of experience will, in turn, place him in a better position to appreciate life fully. African elders realize the importance of proverbs in speech. Thus, when they gather to discuss the welfare of the community, they naturally use proverbs as props to oratory. That explains why proverbs are often regarded as a verbal play of adults. To the African elder, therefore, the proverb is the soul of verbal art. Consequently, to deprive him of proverb is to render him linguistically impotent. Here are some few proverbs that I want you to take into consideration. I will give them a set of four. 1, a fly without an advisor follows the corpse into the grave. 2, a river that travels alone often meanders. 3, the dog that will get lost would not listen to the whistle of the hunter. 4, we do not bypass a man and enter his compound. 5, a man who carries a deity is not a chief. 6, only a foolish man can go after a tiger with bare hands. 7, when you dig a hole of wickedness, make it shallow, for you may be the one to fall into it. 8, he who despises another despises himself. 9, if you look in one direction, your neck will become stiff. 10, 10, the inquisitive eye will only blind its own sight. 10, one who talks too much has very little time to do other things. 12, lying will marry you a wife but will not keep her. Now, the first 4 proverbs are warnings to social deviance. They call attention to the consequences awaiting those who are foolish enough to separate themselves from the social group. The next set of 4 proverbs is a reminder that a man is responsible for his actions and must therefore be prepared to bear their consequences. The last set of 4 proverbs enunciates a major theme. In order to act appropriately, a man must recognize his own limitations. Folktales. The folktale is a delectable verbal art that has charmed humanity through the ages. The etymology of the word folktale indicates that it is a conflation of 2 ideas, namely folk, meaning people, community, and tale for story or narrative. The folktale is perhaps the most popular form of oral literature in Africa. It is equally or usually the first genre and most written form that students of oral literature will discover. African folktales, whether trickster tales, the animal fables, or origin myth, also serve as moral laboratories. The cunning Anansi, especially among the Ghanaians and the Akans, the spider, the arrogance of the tortoise, on the tragedy of the disobedient, or the tragedy of the disobedient child, are not just stories. They are ethical templates. They teach by way of paradox, empathy, and consequences. Often, they allow listeners to explore difficult moral dilemmas in life, imaginative spaces, thereby enhancing emotional intelligence. Griots, poets, and storytellers as historians, educators, and intellectuals. In African societies, the role of the griot among the Ashanti of Ghana, they are called the Kwadwomfo. In West Africa, they are called the griots. In Southern Africa, especially among the Ndebeles, it is called the Imbongi, custodians of collective memory, political commentators, genealogists, and social critics. In West Africa, griots were attached to royal courts and tasked with preserving dynastic histories, recounting lineages and chronicling wars, migrations, treaties, and moral lessons. The Epic of Sondiata, for instance, is not just a story, it is a national archive of the origins, political thought, and cosmology of Mali. Griots function as walking encyclopedia whose accuracy and narrative skill ensure that the past remained a living force. Similarly, in Southern Africa, the Imbongi or praise poet performs during state functions and ceremonial gatherings, often offering praises and critics of political leaders The Imbongi uses poetic language as a rhetorical tool to influence opinion, articulate moral values, and hold power accountable. Now, these Imbongi are very, very important. Now, I want to select one sample of a prose poet in Tanzania, where an Imbongi is praising the king. And I start with a cough. Cough, our Lord, the husband of all maidens. Cough, the lion of the forest, the lightning of the dry season, the ruler of peoples, the livestock of all the heads of cattle, the richest, the noblest breed of our strong ancestors, the one who speaks once, the one who trembles the mountains and moves words, whose names go beyond the boundaries of the setting sun, the big one who never drinks water, who never misses his target, who never eats less than many times. Our king, cough. The one with the thick mane. When you laugh once, drum men laugh with their moons. When your eyes rough around the forest, when your eyes run around, forest freeze in fear. When you sleep, ties of the beautiful daughters of the world provide not enough cushions. When you fart, boom, boom, noble noses pray for more. When you eat, maidens hold bowls of dishes for you. When you wink at the virgin, the fortunate clan brings you cattle for Thanksgiving. When you walk, the earth trembles under your feet. The rocky stones break. When you hold your spear, hyenas dance in thousands and rivers fill up their banks. When you order for a bow, the neighboring kings dig their graves. Cough. Noble one. The chief moderns have warmed up turned milk gas for you, for your throat. 10 villages are bringing banana juice for you, for your throat. 10 maidens have held up their shining palms for your golden spittle. 10 fat he-goats are being slaughtered for your throat. 10 villages are preparing honey brew for your throat. 20 pots of rich broth are being brought for your throat. And if your throat should hurt, 10 medicine men are here ready with their medicines and charms. And 20 virgins will smear oil on your chest and neck. Their breast will warm you up in the cool of the night. This long poem praises the king and extols the importance of royal cough. The praise singer uses laudatory tones to recite the attributes and qualities of the king. The singer refers to the king's intrepidity, ferocity, aggressiveness, unconquerable spirit, and brute strength. These are praiseworthy qualities, especially in a ruler who engages in constant military exploits. But these qualities are counterbalanced by less desirable ones. In this respect, the singer refers to the voracity, high-handedness, and lechery of who? Of the king. I don't want to go much. Reclaiming our oral traditions in contemporary African humanities. The history of marginalization of African oral tradition has not gone uncontested. Across the continent and the diaspora, African scholars, artists, policy advocates have been engaged in a sustained intellectual and pedagogical struggle to reclaim, revalorize, and reinstitutionalize oral traditions within modern academic literature, performance, and legal systems. These efforts reflect a broader movement towards epistemic justice. Scholars as Enongene Sone, Ekwenube, Isidore Opeho, and my mentor himself, Professor, the erudite Professor Kashim Ibrahim Tala, and many others have laid a critical groundwork for repositioning oral literature at the center of African intellectual life. Their scholarship emphasizes that oral traditions are not marginal cultural expressions, but are epistemological resources. Many African universities have begun reintroducing modules and entire programs on oral literature, indigenous knowledge systems, and performance traditions. Departments of literature, African studies, anthropology, philosophy increasingly feature courses that teach students to engage critically with proverbs, folktales, orals, epics, etc., etc. Ekwinebe argues that African oral traditions should be studied not only for their content, but also for their philosophical framework, since they represent ethical reasoning, cosmological insights, communal epistemology, and dialogic logic. On this part, my book, entitled 7 African Folktales, which was published by the Flame Tree Publishers, London 2023, and Central African Folktales, published by the same house in London, 2024, have challenged Eurocentric perceptions that relegate African oral traditions in the margins of academic thought. Sone scholarship highlights the philosophical, pedagogical, and epistemological richness of oral narratives, proverbs, and performances, demonstrating how these forms encode African worldviews, ethics, etc., etc. I don't want to go so much about this thing, but I want us to look at one aspect which concerns us as lecturers. The role of university lecturers as elders and intellectuals. This touches me and you. This touches us here. Madam Vice-Chancellor, distinguished colleagues, students, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. In Africa, we say that a village without elders is like a well without water. And indeed, a society without its intellectual elders, its professors, its storytellers, its keepers of wisdom is like a river that has forgotten its source. This proverb reminds us that in African thought, age is not merely counted in years. It is measured in experience, in the scars of trouble or struggle, in the wisdom of lessons lived and learned. In our oral tradition, elders are the griots, the custodians of memory, the guardians of cultural continuity, and the moral compass of their communities, and so too are the professors called to be. But let me ask this question, especially some of us who have red gowns and black gowns, of course. Let me ask, have we as professors remained true to our calling? It is a challenge to each and every one of us. Have we remained true to our calling? The proverb says that the lead horse sets the pace for those following. If this is true, what pace are we setting for our students who are here? What path are we blazing for the next generation of African intellectuals? Too often, I fear that we as intellectuals are faltered. In the whirlwind of socio-economic and political change here in South Africa and across the continent, something has shifted. The elders of our academic village, us, once revered, respected for their integrity and their moral courage, now risk alienation from the very communities they were called to serve. Some, in pursuit of comfort or proximity to power, have become silent. Others, in fear of offending, have abdicated their sacred duty to speak truth to authority. And our youth, they see us, they see our silence, they see our compromises, and in their disillusionment, they turn away from us, from tradition, from the values that once anchored their forebears. It is no wonder then, Madam Vice-Chancellor, that our university campuses across Africa wrestle with crises of morality, examination malpractices, cybercrime, and a culture of instant gratification. But before we blame them, we must ask, are we not the mirrors in which they see themselves? Are we not? What an old man sees while sitting on the ground, a child will surely not see even while standing on Mount Everest. Esteemed colleagues, the African intellectual tradition demands more of us. Ali Mazrui, that great son of the soil from Kenya, reminds us Africa's ancestors must be consulted through the intermediary of African usage, customs, and tradition. This is not a call to nostalgia. It is a summon to the responsibility. We must look inward towards our ancestry and outward towards humanity. We must become again what our oral traditions envision us to be. Elders who teach not just by precept, but by example. Professors who speak not just to academic journals, but to the soul of the nation. The Cameroonian medic, the late Cameroonian medic, Victor Anomangu, once said or warned us, let not the fault of the next generation be placed on our doorsteps. Today, as I stand here at this inaugural moment, I say, let us not allow that fault. Let us, as African intellectuals, rise again to the occasion. Let us reclaim our place as griots of the modern age storytellers who weave not just words, but features. And as I conclude, throughout this lecture, we have journeyed through the deep currents of the oral traditions of Africa, not as quaint folklore, but as foundational architectures of thought, governance, memory, and cultural continuity. We have seen that orality is not the absence of literacy, nor a prelude to textuality, but a sovereign mode of knowledge, a complete intellectual system with its own logic, aesthetics, and ethical force. And to reclaim orality is not simply to revive forgotten practices. It is to reframe the entire architecture of African intellectual life. It is to shift the gaze from imposed Western paradigms to homegrown epistemologies that speak from within the philosophical, historical, and cultural realities of Africa. As we conclude, 4 key pillars emerge, and as I go through them. At the heart of this transformation lies the decolonization of knowledge. The Indian scholar, Shingapo, reminds us that to decolonize the humanities, and I also quote my dean, who puts humanity at the center. To decolonize humanity is not merely to diversify reading lists, but to dismantle the colonial assumptions that have excluded orality from the intellectual legitimacy. For centuries, the written word has been framed as superior, rational, and scholarly, while orality has been cast as informal, emotional, and irrational. This false binary divide has served colonial and post-colonial institutions alike. The academic world must broaden its definition of intellectual to include these oral practitioners. Recognition could be honorary fellowships and research appointments for renowned oral scholars, oral artists. And in this respect, I want to applaud my dean. When he was the head of the Department of Arts, he invited a scholar, an oral poet, in the Department of Arts to talk, and so on and so on. That's the first I've ever seen in my 26 years of scholarship as a lecturer in the university. Collaborative research projects between scholars and oral custodians. Documentation and digital archiving initiatives led by community members, and the performance-based assessments and publications, etc., etc. Let this lecture not act as a conclusion, but as a call to awakening. The word of reclaiming orality is not only scholarly, it is existential. It is about remembering who we are, how we have known, and what kind of knowledge we wish to pass forward. Orality is not a vestige of forgotten past. It is a vessel of futurity, carrying wisdom that is adaptive, resilient, and urgently needed in our fractured world. In an age of disconnection, orature reminds us of the power of voice, presence, memory, and communion. In a time of cultural homogenization, orality preserves the distinct textures of African thought. In the face of the epistemicide, it whispers, sings, chants, and roars that Africa has always known, always reasoned, and always remembered. We must now reclaim the word, and in doing so, reframe the world. Let us teach again through the tale and proverb. Let us reason again through the performance and dialogue. Let us govern again with the wisdom of the elders. Let us write our futures with our voices. For in the spoken word, performed, remembered, lies the heartbeat of the intellectual soul of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the choice is ours, and history is watching us. And, Madam Vice-Chancellor, let me just have a few words of acknowledgement. Madam Vice-Chancellor, how do I begin my song of gratitude and the melody of my appreciation? When the roots are deep, there is no reason to fear the wind. How do I compose a poem of acknowledgement for those who not only gave me the ink and the pen, but also taught me what to say, how to say it, and how to weave words that heal, inspire, and preserve memory? My appreciation is like an autobiographical storyline, layered, textured, and steeped in gratitude. Behold, an embodiment of the grace, personification of favor, and a living specimen of mercy. Right from infancy, Madam Vice-Chancellor, the footprints of God have been visible in the sands of my life. Even before I knew him as my Lord and personal Savior, in my teenage years, his love surrounded me like the air we breathe, unseen yet indispensable. Through the seasons of plenty and scarcity, joy and sorrow, his hands has held me firm. The river that forgets its source will soon get dry. Today, I give the Almighty God thanks, praise, honor, and adoration for who he is and for who he has been, a rock in the wilderness and a light in the shadows. Madam Vice-Chancellor, I lift my deepest gratitude to God for the lives of my parents, Enongene Sone, who died in 1981. I was about 8 years. And Adeline Kume, my mother, my beloved my mother, and my grandmother, Mama Rebecca Ntube Enosone. And my elder brother turned father, Enongene Emmanuel Echama. A child does not grow tall without the elders who hold him firm. You were my pillars, my guiding lights, and the architect of my foundation. Your sacrifices, wisdom, and unwavering love paved that path that has led me to this sacred podium. I carry with me the memory of my brother father, Enongene Emmanuel Echama, whose sudden departure months before this lecture carved an indelible void in my heart. I remember when Prof. Trisha called me. This lecture was supposed to take place on the 26th of March. And I told Professor Sisha, I lost my brother turned father. I couldn't stand before you to give any inaugural lecture. And so it was postponed. And today I have done it. So, whose sudden death months before this lecture carved an indelible void in my heart. When a mighty tree falls in the forest, its echoes linger for generations. Though absent in body, your legacies reverberate in every word I speak today. Your spirit standing tall beside me as I take this momentous step. Madam Vice-Chancellor, my darling, dear Vice-Chancellor. Thank you. The lizard that leaps from a high Iroko tree says it will praise itself if no one else does. But in my case, I did not to leap alone. Your visionary leadership has been my springboard. You embody the spirit of doability and a relentless pursuit of excellence. Thank you for believing in me, Madam Vice-Chancellor, for your affirmations and endorsements that have propelled me forward. Your strategic guidance has been my compass through uncharted waters, and your affectionate call, the greatest, has lifted me beyond the ordinary. When the hunter learns from the lion, he too becomes fearless. Your encouragement, both in public and private, has been the wind beneath my wings, propelling me into the domain of greatness. Madam Vice-Chancellor, thank you, thank you, thank you. To my mentors and supervisors in Cameroon, Professor Kashim Ibrahim Tala, who is watching this lecture online, and Prof. Kuche Funko Gabriel, you planted in me the seeds of orature and nurtured them with meticulous care. A farmer who plants a tree does not eat its fruit alone. Generations come to rest under it. Your mentorship shaped my intellectual vision and fortified my lifelong commitment to African oral traditions. To my late Professor Dan Ben Amos, who is a world-leading scholar in oral literature, my host at the University of Pennsylvania, your scholarly brilliance and generous spirit continue to inspire me. When the storyteller dies, his stories do not perish. They live on in the minds of those who listen. Though you now dwell among the ancestors, your influence breathes life into my work and resonates in the communities we both cherished. Let me also express my deepest gratitude to my PhD supervisor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Prof. Enongene Sone. A teacher opens the door, but you must enter yourself, says a Chinese proverb. But Prof. Tuna not only opened the door for me, she lit the path and patiently walked alongside me, shaping my scholarship with precision and care. Madam Vice-Chancellor, I owe much thanks to Professor Tabisani Lovo, here seated, my executive dean and brother colleague. They often call us twin brothers in the Department of Arts, whose intellectual championship and unwavering support help give shape to this inaugural topic. Like the Akan say, the one who climbs a good tree is given a push. And indeed, Prolovo gave me that push with brotherly kindness and academic vision. He is the one, of course, when I was contemplating on which topic to present, he said, Sonny, I know you. I know the type of discipline. Go for this. Many people would like to listen. I thank you, Professor Lovo. Thank you. To my colleagues in the Faculty of Law, Humanities, and Social Sciences, and especially those in the Department of Arts, I say thank you. Your camaraderie, mentorship, and critical engagements have been fertile soil in which my intellectual seeds have flourished. Wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one individual can embrace it. Together, we have embraced and nurtured the vision of scholarship and celebrates our African heritage. To my Cameroonian community in Tata, particularly my Sowetan family, you have been my anchor. Like the Bakosi proverb reminds us, a man is never truly dead if his people still speak his name. Your unwavering presence has kept alive the cultural memory and solidarity that have carried me across. I must also acknowledge my cousin brother, Police Commissioner Songca Divine Tungwe. Please, can you start? Thank you. Your steady encouragement and pride in my achievement have been a source of strength. To the Sone family, beautifully represented here, my sister, Dr. Doris Zele Sone, please can you stand? And her husband, Dr. Roland Ngo Ewene, can you stand? I am profoundly grateful. You have kept the family's light burning bright across the seas. To my Nkiko brothers, sisters, and friends, Ahone Doris, Dr. Eric Sumelong Nane, Dr. Olong Nelson Ewane, Dr. Betty Ngaje Ransom, Nane Kinsley Nkwele George Sumelong, Sone Fred, Elime Jean Winslow, you are my support. The proverb says, when the roots are deep, there is no need to fear the wind. You have been my roots and grounding me with love and belonging. To the Lord Mayor of Bangem Council, Ekungwe Christopher Kang, I say thank you for standing with me as a symbol of the community from which I draw my identity and inspiration. My greatest debt of gratitude is reserved to my lovely wife, Evelyn Sone, and our two precious children, Precious Keller and Tube Nosona Nesone Jr. Can you please stand? Thank you. I've been reminded that he who loves his wife loves himself. Evelyn, your love and sacrifices have been my sanctuary. Precious Enosone, you are precious, and Enosone Jr., you are my daily reminder that life's true legacy lies in the seeds we plant for the next generation. To my colleagues and students from the University of Chang, where I taught before, University of Burundi, University of Swaziland, and the University of KwaZulu-Natal, I am grateful to the rich academic and human relationship we share. And to my WUSU students, my darling WUSU students, past and present, you are living proof. You are the living proof that teaching is not merely about imparting knowledge, but about igniting minds and transforming lives. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And in embracing you, I too have been embraced and challenged to grow. Music, that is my story. That is my song. Praising the Savior, praising the soul. That is the story. That is my song. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh my God. Thank you very much, Prof. Sone. That was so touching. That was so wonderful. Thank you, Prof. Colleagues, I'm going to call upon Prof. Beatrice Jume, Professor of Economics. Sorry, I mean economics, I make mistakes. Yes. Professor of English, Department of Arts. Over to you, Prof. Ekanjume.
Thank you, Program Director, Madam Vice-Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellors, Executive Deans and Deputy Executive Deans, members of the Executive Management, esteemed professors and scholars, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and above all, Professor Sone, allow me to say all protocol observed. It is both a profound honor and a singular academic privilege to respond to Professor Sone's inaugural lecture, a lecture which you will all agree with me that it has been delivered with intellectual elegance, moral clarity, and a deep colonial urgency. His chosen theme, Orality and Intellectualism, the role of oral literature in shaping Africa's knowledge systems, transcends the ritual of an academic milestone. It is in truth a moment of reckoning, a discursive intervention that interrogates our epistemic assumptions, unsettles inherited hierarchies of knowledge, and calls us to reimagine, to reinvent what it means to know, to teach, and to be African scholars in the 21st century. In reclaiming the place of African orality as a legitimate, sophisticated, and enduring mode of intellectual inquiry, Professor Sone has disrupted entrenched binaries and extended a bold invitation to reimagine the university as a space where memory, rhythm, story, and performance stand shoulder to shoulder with written word. As I engaged with his lecture, Madam Vice-Chancellor, 5 thematic reflections stood out for me, and my response to his lecture will be based on those 5. First, this lecture to me represents an epistemic reclamation. Professor Sone positions his work firmly within the decolonial project, one that does not seek to romanticize Africa's past, but rather to re-authenticate its modes of thought and being. His lecture dismantles the long-standing hierarchies that privileged the written over the oral, individual genius over collective memory, and Eurocentric logic over indigenous reasoning. By foregrounding the griot, the imbongi, the storyteller, and the sage as intellectuals in their own right, Professor Sone challenges the narrow Cartesian imagination of the intellectual as a solitary, text-bound figure. Instead, he offers us a deeply African model of intellectualism, socially embedded, morally grounded, performatively enacted, and communally validated. In so doing, he situates himself within the intellectual lineage of the likes of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Ifi Amadiome, Yves Mudimbe, and Amadou Hamfate Ba, among others. Yet he adds a distinct Southern African resonance rooted in remembered knowledge, performed philosophy, and the voices of our elders. Second, this lecture, Madam Vice-Chancellor, reminds us that intellectual labor is also moral labor. One of its most compelling interventions lies in its interrogation of the role of the university professor, which is not merely as a conveyor of information, but as an elder in the African sense, a moral compass, a storyteller, and a custodian of cultural memory. In an age of neoliberal pressures, technocratic curricula, and moral drift, Professor Sone recenters the ethical purpose of scholarship. To teach, he says, is to shape character, to research, is to preserve memory, and to publish, is to speak not only to global journals, but also to local communities. His words call us to ask a sobering question. Are we, as African academics, still the elders of the village? For like he said in the proverb, which says, I quote, "A village without elders is like a well without water." Likewise, a university without scholars of conscience is but a curriculum without meaning. Third, Professor Sone compels us to rethink orality in the digital age, from fireplaces to fiber optics. We often consign oral traditions to the past, frozen around the fireside or preserved in folkloric settings. Yet, this lecture disrupts such nostalgia. Orality, he demonstrates, is not static. It has migrated to mainstream and most powerfully to social media, where digital griots speak to both the continent and the diaspora. In this reframing, orality is not an endangered relic, but a resilient and adaptive knowledge system, one that has survived colonization, marginalization, and now engages algorithmic capitalism. Yet, Professor Sone is careful to resist uncritical celebration. He names the risk of commodification, decontextualization, and digital inequalities. This balance of celebration with critique marks his scholarship as rigorous and uncompromising. Fourth, this lecture has direct implications for institutional transformation at Walter Sisulu University, Madam Vice-Chancellor, and beyond. Professor Sone's words are not just a philosophical reflection. The lecture is a strategic imperative. It speaks directly to what African higher education institutions and Walter Sisulu University in particular should become: the pursuit of cognitive justice, curricular decolonization, and knowledge pluralism. The call of the lecture to integrate oral literature and indigenous knowledge systems into curricula is a call we must heed, not as a gesture of inclusion, but as a structural reordering of academic priorities. It is time we stop treating oral traditions as ancillary to the other disciplines. They are not supplementary, they are foundational. At Walter Sisulu in particular, where our historic mission is to serve rural and marginalized communities, we are uniquely positioned to heed this call. We can be the university where students learn to cite Foucault and Derrida, yes, but equally to reference the village elder, the praise poet, and the market storyteller. By treating oral traditions not as decorative supplements, but as foundational epistemologies, we move towards a structural reordering of academic priorities. That is what Prof. Sone has taught us. Hosting this lecture itself, Madam Vice-Chancellor, is a sign that WUSU has taken a decisive step towards pluralism of knowledge systems, towards an academia where a grandmother's tale, a praise poem, or a folk tale can be treated with the same reverence and analytical rigor as a Western philosophical treatise. And lastly, Professor Sone's lecture inaugurates a paradigm shift from silence to song. He reminds us that to reclaim the word is to reframe the world. Orality, as he argues, is not the opposite of literacy. It is its equal, its complement, and in many ways, its moral compass. It is in the proverb, the chant, the folktale, and the satire that Africa has long conducted its ethical debates, transmitted its sciences, and shaped its futures. We, as African scholars, must resist the temptation of simply translating these traditions into Western academic idioms. Rather, we must allow them to speak in their own rhythm, their own cadence, and their own authority. In the spirit of oral wisdom, as taught us today by Professor Sone, let me invoke a proverb that echoes throughout his lecture. Wisdom, I quote, "Wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one person can embrace it," unquote. Professor Sone has embraced one strong branch, the branch of orality. It is now our collective responsibility to reach for the others, which include policy, reform, institutional integration, youth engagement, and language justice, among others. Thank you, Professor Sone, for giving us the word, not just to listen to, but to carry forward, to interrogate, and to live by. In conclusion, I would like to say to you, Professor Sone, that this lecture stands as a profound contribution to the ongoing project of knowledge decolonization and epistemic justice. It advances our understanding of orality not as a peripheral practice, but as a central pillar of African intellectual traditions, one capable of reshaping both pedagogy and scholarship in the 21st century. Your intervention today compels us to reconsider the role of African universities in honoring and institutionalizing indigenous knowledge systems. It challenges us to cultivate curricula that speak with the voice of the elder, the griot, the storyteller, voices that have too long been silenced in the academic spaces. The ball is therefore in our court as intellectuals. And for this intellectual labor, we owe you, Professor Sone, our gratitude and enduring recognition. I thank you.
Wow, that was great, Prof. Thank you very much. Before asking you, Prof. Songca, to come and present the gift to the honorable professor here, I just have few words, Prof. Songca, to you. Because I am one of the recipients of this occasion. I have been inaugurated in this university by you, Prof. And many of us, I can see Prof. Abioha there, and others that are not here, that received this honor, this dignity, through your leadership, Prof. I want to thank you for that. Because I know the feeling. That's why I'm thanking you, Prof. Because in other universities, this opportunity is not there, but you made sure that the full professors are inaugurated at WSU. Thank you very much, Prof. This I'm talking from experience because I know the feeling that Prof is going to feel now when you are presenting the trophy. It's quite a touchy moment. It's quite a lovely moment. It's an honor to be given this trophy. And it stays, unfortunately for WSU, MCT keeps it at YouTube. Anytime, colleagues, you wanted to check your inaugural lecture, and those that did not come, you say just press YouTube, WSU, Professor Sone, inaugural lecture. It will come. Even if someone says, I missed yours, Toto, I say, don't worry, YouTube is there. So, Professor, you have created life for us. You have created a lifetime gift for these inaugural lectures. We really, really appreciate it. So I will give it to you, Prof. Songca, to give Prof. Sone this gift. And I wish by the time Prof. Songca is coming from that angle and giving the gift, there can be that song of Prof. Sone. Yes, yes. Come, Prof. Yeah. This is a demonstration for you. Oh my God, this is a great moment. My students study until you are inaugurated. My colleagues study until you are inaugurated. This is a great moment. I want all those that surrounds me to reach this place, to reach this level. And we are all able. and we can do it. I will ask you, Professor TN. Professor TN has got same initials as me. Sometimes in these meetings, when I put my hand up, they will say, Professor Ndlovu, can you talk? And it's Professor Nganywa. Okay, so Professor Thabisan Ndlovu, can you please come, Executive Dean, Faculty of Law, Humanities and Social Science, to give us a congratulatory message.
Madam Vice-Chancellor, Prof. Songca, DVC Feza, DVC Linnington, members of the EMC, executive directors, executive deans, deputy executive deans, esteemed colleagues, students, honored guests, Professor Sone's family, and above all, our distinguished inaugural lecturer today. We stand not merely as witnesses of a lecture, but as participants in a renewal of memory, a rekindling of ancestral fires, a resurrection of voices long silenced. But now, how do I congratulate the man mountain? You can see that Prof. Sone is big physically, and you can see, or you have seen, that philosophically he is also a colossus. But how indeed do I congratulate the man mountain after such an inimitable delivery? It is always difficult to come after Prof. Sone. I think I should do it in an incantatory manner that he will understand. Prof. Sone, you began with the Malian proverb, when an elder dies, a library burns to the ground. But this day, because of you, a library has been rebuilt before our eyes, shelves of wisdom rising again from the ash, corridors of memory echoing once more with the steps of our ancestors. Through your words, we entered a library not bound in paper, but inscribed in voice, in rhythm, in breath. You reminded us that Africa has always thought, always taught, always reasoned, even before ink touched paper. Philosophy was spoken in Proverbs, law carried in praise poetry, science whispered in ritual, and history sung in the cadence of the griot. You showed us that orality is not fragile but fierce, not fleeting but fertile. It is an archive that breathes, a text that sings, a philosophy that dances among the people. And in affirming this truth, you reclaimed the dignity of Africa's intellectual past and wove it into our present. It takes courage to stand where others once silenced us. Colonial arrogance told us our stories were superstition, our proverbs mere play, our elders irrelevant to modern knowledge. But today, through your voice, we heard a refusal to forget, a refusal to diminish, a refusal to allow epistemicide to bury Africa's thought. You have spoken not with apology, but with affirmation. You have declared, our griots are historians, Our imbongis are philosophers. Our storytellers are intellectuals. Our elders are professors of life. Your lecture itself was poetry. It moved like a song around the fire, like a drumbeat calling us to attention. It reminded us that the classroom is not the only university. The village square, the market stall, the festival stage, these too are academies where wisdom is performed, debated, remembered. We could hear in your cadence the grandmother telling stories to children beneath the stars, the griot reciting genealogies by the court, the imbongi chanting both praise and rebuke before kings. In you, these voices converged, alive once more. You did not give us nostalgia. You pointed us forward. You spoke of digital griots, storytellers on YouTube and TikTok, poets on global stages, scholars archiving oral traditions with new technologies. You reminded us that fiber optic cables now carry the ancestral voice across oceans, and that the proverb still lives, even in pixels. Yes, you warned us of dangers, commodification, appropriation, the risk of flattening sacred stories into digital spectacle. But you also gave us responsibility to preserve with reverence, to digitize with consent, to ensure that the soul of orality is not lost in its translation. Perhaps your most urgent challenge was directed to us, the professors, the intellectual elders of the university. You reminded us of the proverb, a village without elders is like a well without water. If this is true, what kind of water flows from our wells? Do our students drink wisdom or disillusionment? Too often, you warned, we have fallen silent out of comfort, fear, or compromise. But you have summoned us back to courage, back to integrity, back to the role of griots in the academy. For the true professor is not only a researcher, but a custodian of memory. Not only a lecturer, but a moral guide. Not only a writer, but a truth teller. Your lecture, Prof. Sone, was more than reflection. It was a call to action. You called us to decolonize our curricula, to teach our students that wisdom dwells in Proverbs as much as in Plato, that the griot deserves citation as much as the Greek. You called for policy that honors oral custodians as intellectuals, for archives built in villages and classrooms alike, for research that respects elders as co-authors of knowledge. And above all, you called us to remember that the spoken word creates worlds. To lose our stories is to lose our sight, but to reclaim orature is to regain vision, voice, and belonging in the cosmos. Professor Sone, today you have not only delivered a lecture, you have lit a torch in the ancestral dust. You have reminded us that to teach through tale, to reason through performance, to govern with proverb, and to remember through song is not to regress, but to advance toward a decolonized future. We congratulate you, not merely for an inaugural address, but for an inaugural act of reclamation. You have given us back to ourselves, and for that, we thank you. For in your voice, we hear the voices of many. In your words, the rhythm of the drum, and in your courage, the wisdom of the elder. Congratulations, custodian of memory. Congratulations, griot of the academy. Congratulations, torchbearer of Africa's intellectual soul. Thank you.
That's a great message, Prof. Ndlovu. You know, Prof. Sone, your lecture reminds me when I was a young teacher and I was in town and I met my principal from high school. Then my principal said, and then I was so excited to see my principal, and he was a Xhosa principal. So he said, I said, "Hello, principal, I'm a teacher." Then he said, "What are you teaching them? Are you teaching them cream or watery mass, like amasamun, okanye cream ngaka?" So you are reminding me that when we teach, we need to be those teachers that teach our students cream so that they succeed. The curriculum that we give to our students today, you taught us how it should be. So your lecture is really making a difference in my own life by this moment. Thank you very much, Prof, for that. Without wasting time, I'm going to call you Prof. Linnington. When I call you Prof, I call you so that you do a vote of thanks. But I want to thank you first, before you thank us. Because I know that in your vote of thanks speech, you are not going to thank yourself. But I wanted to appreciate Prof. Linnington because ever since she joined the university, she is honoring our inaugural lectures and doing a great vote of thanks. I'm sure you are not going to disappoint me even today. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Program Director, Vice-Chancellor. I've got no pressure on me at all after that. Thank you. And I always write my thanks while I'm sitting listening because no event is the same. You have your culprits that I have to thank with joy, but I would like to just do it my own way. And I'd like to start with Prof. Sone, and I'm not going to repeat what everyone else has said, but to thank you from my heart because you shared your heart with us. And that is really special. One thing I have learned in my many years, that you only learn other people's stories through storytelling. And without storytelling, you can't learn the other. And without learning the other, you will never understand anyone else's worldview. And without a worldview, we are poor indeed. And that our orality and our oral traditions are carrying that forward. And thank you so much. It came from your heart, and it spoke to, I think, everyone's heart, and I really appreciate it. Vice-Chancellor, I want to thank you, not just for being here today and handing over the trophy, but for the thought that's gone into these inaugural lectures, which Prof. Nganya spoke to. I really think they're special, which they should be, and they're personal. And I really want to thank you for your leadership in that regard, and for what you've actually done for inaugural lectures at Walter Sisulu University. By example, and by changing things, we share our values and we show our values. And the value that we speak of in pursuit of excellence is actually demonstrated in our inaugural lectures, and the value of trying to be an impactful African university is also demonstrated. So I want to thank you for that leadership, which is leadership in action, and for everything you have done. I want to thank the program director before I forget. You're also our host. You've put together Prof. Nganya. You've done all the hard work behind the scenes, so thank you so much for what you have done. And I know behind you there is an office that helps. So all those landscape people that we often forget, they're thought of, and thanks to all of them as well as yourself. Now I'm going to go down my list as it is in there. Professor, thank you for your introduction. Thank you for your presence. And you always, even if you are reading introduction, it really comes across fresh and meaningful. And just thank you for that. And your wonderful smile here today. I know you were sitting next to me, and I could hear how you were responding to the lecture. To the academic respondent, Prof. Ikanjuma, as well as to the Executive Dean, Prof. Nglovo, you both reflected and responded in different ways to the lecture, and thank you for that. One was very academically thoughtful, the other one was very much more a personality, university thoughtful, and that thoughtfulness is noted. And you both indicated how the lecture has sought to reverse the diminishing and to increase the flaring up. And I think that fire that flares up has been started today. Then I need to thank everyone from communication marketing, Mr. Kwaya, you and your team. Thank you. And even thank you for the grey robes. They're not as nice as our normal ones, but thank you. To the photographers, to the sound and videos, to the cleaners, because it's nice and clean. I always say we need to recognize that we have a really nice environment in this university in terms of cleanliness, and we need to be thankful for that, not only to operations, but to every cleaner who's come in and made sure that it's an enabling environment to listen to a lecture, to the security that looks after us, to everyone in the whole university is actually supporting this lecture. Success, academic success is everyone. From our special guests here today, from the faculty, from the students, from it's a success across the whole university. HR, who helps us with bits and pieces along the way. Finance, who helps us with our research. So to everyone I want to thank, but specifically for today and for the refreshments that afterwards as well. But thank you to all who have done even the small things to make this a seamless and wonderful event. To the choir, I almost forgot. And every time I almost forget, someone yells at me. You bring joy to our hearts, and thank you very much. It's so appreciated. It's an event without music, but more than music without a choir would not quite be the same. And so thank you for bringing dignity and to the occasion as well. So I think I can't think of anyone I haven't thanked. If I haven't, oh yes, I have. To Prof. Sone's family, it's written here. Family, friends, colleagues, students. Now, put the family as last. To Prof. Sone's family, thank you for being here. Thank you, and this is for your friends as well. Thank you for your support over the years. And a person is a reflection a lot of their home. So thank you for being a home. He can go home and rest, but also a home that supports him. And with that, I think I've thanked everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Linton. Thank you very much, Prof. Now we have come to an end of our program. But I just want, because in South Africa, Mem Sone, in South Africa this month is a Women's Month. We are celebrating women in this month of August. So I just want to celebrate you today for supporting Prof. because especially that I want to thank you, because I know to have a partner that has got awkward times to work, because I know we academics, it's either we sleep late or we wake up early, one of the two. So I don't know, Prof, which one is yours, whether it's early or late, but one of those times is affecting your partner, because it's not your partner's time, and you are disturbing there, because the time you wake up. And one of my students, when replying in her part, she said, we as Prof. Nganywa students, we were asking each other, when is she spending time with the husband in the early mornings? Because in the early mornings, 3 o'clock, I'm waking up all my students and say, respond to the email. So I know that burden to the partner. So thank you very much for the support. Prof wouldn't be where he is today if it was not for your support. Thank you very much. And to all partners, colleagues, to be an academic is not an easy route, and partners need to support each other in this journey. And children, you need to support us, because sometimes you complain too much. But we love you. We really love you, colleagues. Family is the best. Thank you very much, colleagues. And you have been a very good audience for me today. I want to thank everybody for being a good audience, and also everybody, even the people who are operating instruments. Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, now here is an announcement. We are going to have a song from the choir, and then everybody will stand up, because after the national anthem, I'm going to ask the choir to lead us with the national anthem. Then after the national anthem, we are going to get a song that we are going to be led by our VC, and then followed by Prof. Sone and all of us, and then the academics follow us, and then the family, and then the elders follow us, and then. Choir.